Welcome back to another episode of Monday Night Muscle, joined by the voice of professional bodybuilding, Bob Ciccarello, and the CEO president of the Olympia and Muscle and Fitness and Flex, Dan Solomon. We are on remote right now here in the state of Florida. Dan, this is actually your home state, and I want to make sure that everybody understands the context. We got some history here. You were starting in your media role with Pro Bodybuilding Weekly with Bob Chick. Take us back to how that all began.
It's funny that you would ask that as I'm seated between you guys, because you guys are both such a big part of that story. Now, we go back to, I would say, early 2005.
Wow.
And I'm in my car and I'm driving somewhere, and I remember I was a big Miami Heat basketball fan. I remember hearing an interview, and at that time, Shaquille O'Neal was playing for the Miami Heat. And he gave an interview, and I'm listening to it on talk radio, and I'm thinking to myself, what a shame it is that bodybuilding fans don't get to hear the voices of their favorite bodybuilders. Now, keep in mind, this was long before social media.
Yep.
This was long before, people were doing any of this stuff. And I thought, what a shame is it at that time that people couldn't, unless they went to the Olympia, they never heard your voice, right? And so we ended up, I created a program called Pro Bodybuilding Weekly, which was aimed at allowing bodybuilding fans around the world the opportunity to hear directly from their favorite bodybuilding and fitness celebrities. But the interesting part, that's a story that most people by now know. What people might not know is that you and I were pretty close friends at the time. You and I hadn't really got to know each other that well at that point in time.
So me and Bob met when we were 17 and 18 years old.
Exactly. So this goes back about 15, 16 years ago. And I picked up the phone and I called you. And I told you about the idea. And I said, you want to do this with me? And you had your daughter was in the oven. She was due in the coming months.
Right.
And she ended up kind of taking you down a whole different path for a while. You got busy, and rightfully so. So then, I kind of went into a damage control mode.
Right.
And then I called you because I had seen you do something, and I thought, what a talented storyteller you are when it comes to describing the history of bodybuilding and delivering the news. So I called you, and you and I quickly reached a deal to become partners on that program.
Is it true that it actually fell in the cracks in the contract negotiations with you and Shawn? He was just demanding too much money.
I needed food. I needed expenses.
Had a mouth to feed.
Look, your list of things that you need to know. But that's actually the way that went down. So that's how that all came together.
Right.
And then, of course, you and I ended up co-hosting that show together for several years, and the rest is
history. You had some of the biggest names. I mean, you had everybody. The who's who was on your radio show.
Yeah, it's funny because one of our greatest, almost you could say, badges of honor was when we would, we were committed. You'll remember this. We were committed at that time to having every winner of the Mr. Olympia from the first one, Larry Scott, to I think when we stopped doing it, Mr. Olympia probably at that time was maybe Jay or Dexter, and we were so committed to having everyone. And we went through this long process, and it took us years to accomplish it, because you can't do that anymore, of course, because a few of them unfortunately have since passed.
Sure.
But at that time, they were all alive still. And one by one, we were able to get them, including Arnold himself and Larry Scott and
Ben Weeder. We had them all.
Absol Franco.
Trivia question.
Yes.
For 1,000 points and control of the board, Shawn, who was the very first guest on Pro Bodybuilding Weekly?
Well, I was having a baby, so I was like in a whole nother world.
You weren't having anything. Okay, let's just establish
that
right now. But who was the first guest? I'll give you a hint. Dan just mentioned his name.
Larry Scott.
No. So the answer to the question,
the first Olympia
answer to the question is, earlier that year in 2005, I had gotten wind that Dexter Jackson was not going to do that year's Olympia. So last time he didn't do the Olympia, by the way. He's done it every year since.
Right.
But I had gotten wind that Dexter wasn't going to do the Olympia. Now, this was back before guys can deliver the message through Twitter or Facebook. They weren't doing that.
None of those things were around.
No. So he needed a platform to put that message out. So I called up Dexter and I said, Dex, we're creating this new program. We think it's going to be a great way for fans to hear from you guys. And why don't you come on the show and give us our first piece of big news that we can deliver? Dexter came on, and he ended up being our first guest.
Well, I don't think either one of you will remember this, but I gave these guys their first big break because the Shawn Ray Colorado Pro happened in 2006. And Bob, do you remember who won that competition?
I believe that was Kai Greene.
For $1,000, you failed.
So the answer to that question, Bob, I'm glad.
No, it was not Kai Greene.
You were at the mic.
Listen, I was at the mic at
there was
100,000 shows.
It was the first Shawn Ray
Colorado. All right, boys, settle down. Let me give the folks the answer.
Go ahead.
Here's what we got. Shawn, you are correct. You were the first to actually bring Bob and I, put us on
Heath.
your stage.
On the
Phil
stage.
Heath.
You put us on your stage, and actually we created a Pro Bodybuilding Weekly broadcast.
How cool was that?
On the stage,
awesome.
and it was as if we were doing the show from the stage while the guys were coming across.
That was cool.
One of the guys in that show that year happened to be making his pro debut. It was his hometown. Of course, his name was Phil Heath. He came on. It was Phil Heath. Darren Charles had come into that show really on fire.
King of the $10,000
Right,
Yep.
King of the
show.
$10,000
And
shows.
Phil ended up defeating Darren to win his first show. A week later, he would go to the New York Pro, and he would win his second show a week later.
That's right.
Out of the gates. But Phil won that show, his pro debut, and I always say it's one of the things that I think we're really proud of, that we were a part of that history.
You know,
history.
the reason
historic
why
night in Colorado.
Kai stuck in my mind was, if I'm not mistaken, he was in the show.
Yes, he
Finished
was.
dead last.
Dead last,
Dead last.
but his routine was killer, right? I think it was Dirty Diane, like the first time anybody saw it. Place erupts. Nobody knows really who Kai Greene is at that point, but I remember you and I talking, because nobody really knew who he was. He didn't have a dime to his name. We were actually going to pool our money together to have him go to like the New York Pro or something, or the Arnold or something like that,
New
because
York
we
was
knew
actually-
he would win the Best Poser Award.
Right.
And he was just coming up, and he's living like in a crappy little apartment somewhere.
Well,
and
he
all
did
that.
win the Best Poser Award.
At that show,
$10,000.
in fact, there was
Tell the
talk
story.
that, and I don't know the details. A lot of it might be urban legend by now. I don't know the whole story, but I know the way it was presented. The way it was presented to me was that he was in a real tough spot
was
financially.
done.
He wasn't going to be able to compete.
Wasn't going to be able to compete.
Right.
He finished dead last. Didn't know how he was going to get back home, and and then he ended up winning the best routine award.
Yeah.
easily.
$10,000.
Picked up $10,000, and that $10,000
Parlayed
is what
it.
sort of launched his.
Parlayed it. Yeah, he
next
went
steps.
back. Obviously, he lived in New York, competed in New York, and then the following year, I mean, to put the ribbon on it, he came back and won the 2007 or 2006 or 2007. Yeah, 2007 Shawn Ray Colorado Pro.
Now,
the rest was history. After
The rest
that
was
for Kai
history.
Greene. I launched all of you guys into this
I got to
industry.
go back into the time machine a little bit, because a lot of people don't know your background. Like I interviewed Jake a while ago. A lot of people don't know. He actually started out literally as a bodybuilder. Tall as he is, he's 6'10".
Yeah.
Jake.
Yes.
So everybody knows Jake now, owner of the Olympia, Wings of Strength, and all that stuff. But he's a bodybuilder at heart. He went into the gym, started training, got himself kicked out of one of the gyms back then.
Right.
I think it was Vince Gironda's gym. He
Yeah,
actually got
Vince.
thrown out. Jake was a rebel even then. But you started out as a bodybuilder. You've actually got a
did.
pedigree
I
in
did.
the NPC
I
stage.
did. I was not a successful one, but I did get some experience.
I will
with-
find that photograph.
Yeah.
So in 1998, I attended. I was in New York on unrelated business. I was always a fan of fitness and bodybuilding. Grew up reading the magazines and following all you guys. And I was staying at a hotel across the street from the Madison Square Garden. It was the fall of 1998. It was the same night, same weekend that the 1998 Mr. Olympia happened to be taking place. I went across the street. I somehow managed to get some tickets for the show. And when the show was over, of course, that was the year Ronnie Coleman won it for the first time. Dorian came to the podium at the
Yeah,
start of
buddy.
that show to announce his retirement. You finished fifth that year.
Thanks for reminding me.
Yeah.
It was a great. It was really an epic show. That when you think back to
Sergio
that.
Oliva was there.
Yeah.
Sinbad was there.
That's
We
right. That's right. Sinbad.
and Janet Jackson was performing that night.
Well, the
at the-
village people were kicking
Yeah, the
around.
Phil-
That's right. Sinbad opened the show with actually a pretty good bit.
Nice line.
But so we ended up doing that, and when the show ended, I met the aforementioned Darren Charles at a post-event banquet or something, and we got to talking, and we kind of hit it off. We swapped information. Turned out we lived in the same city,
Right.
so he became my trainer, and through that we ended up kind of getting to know each other, and then he gave me the courage to enter a local contest, and I did 4 or 5 local NPC competitions, and had a good time with it. Kind of learned what it was like to suffer a little bit and go through the things that you guys go through. And I always say that everybody, at some point in time, if you have a chance to experience a contest prep, you learn so much about your body and how your body responds to things. So it was valuable for me. Now, quickly I realized that it wasn't something that I was going to carry forward with, but yeah, so I did get a chance to stick my toe in those waters.
And one of the things you also had an opportunity was to participate in the 2003 Shawn Ray Muscle Camp in Miami. We had Jay Cutler, we had Dexter Jackson. Matter of fact, we got a photograph floating around, and you're there. You're in that muscle camp photograph. And then you just took off, because with that media background that you had with Pro Bodybuilding Weekly, and working closely with Darren Charles, you became a historian of the sport. I mean, you told all the stories. Tell us, you went to media school for this?
Did. So I graduated from the University of Hartford.
But what did you want to do? Like, what was your home run?
My home run would have been being
ESPN?
My home run would have been being the play-by-play announcer for the Baltimore Orioles. My baseball team. That would have been my holy grail gig. And that would have been something I would have loved doing. But I will say this, though. I'm almost grateful that that didn't happen. Not just because I'm here doing this and with you guys today, but baseball is very much an outlet for me. It's the thing that connects me to my son and to my father. And it's very personal to me. It's very cathartic to me. I sit back, I watch ball games, and I'm just so glad that it never became a business to me.
Right.
Because had I gotten into that, suddenly, you know how it is.
It becomes work.
It becomes work.
That's why I got out of bodybuilding.
That's right.
Once I realized competing was work and it wasn't pleasure, that's when I kind of started transitioning.
That's right.
Kind of like you with ballet.
That's why I never pursued it, really. Although I was late on my, for guy 270, I moved around like I was 268.
Yeah, you do have two left feet. But let's get back to Dan. So Dan, being the historian of bodybuilding, telling the stories, you pretty much met everybody there is. You worked with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Of course, you worked with the past administration with AMI, and of course, Joe Weider and Ben Weider, very close with Ben and Rob Wilkins and that whole crew. All of that stuff has led you to where you're at now. You're running the Olympia. You're in your second year running that. But you still have your hands in all these other aspects behind the scenes, Bob. I mean, he's not just a pretty face. You're working with a lot of the sponsors. You're working with a lot of the athletes. You're working with a lot of behind the scenes stuff. Tell us a little bit, how heavy is that weight for you?
So it's funny you tell that story and you put it and you frame it that way. So when I was brought to New York a couple years ago to meet with American Media CEO David Pecker. Now, keep in mind, AMI, as most of you guys know, was the owner of Muscle and Fitness and Olympia up until earlier this year. Right. And at that time, they were looking for somebody to oversee their Olympia property for them. And I'll never forget, so David sits with me at lunch. We spent about 3 hours talking. And we were discussing all the nuances of the Olympia. And I was kind of focused more on the year-round component of the Olympia. You know, I always thought the 4 or 5 day event was, you know, the Olympia is a great event. It's a great weekend, well organized and all that. But I always thought the year-round component of the Olympia was really heavily underutilized. It was the branding, the licensing, the marketing, all the things that go towards making the Olympia really mean something, so that when you get to Olympia weekend, there's the height of anticipation. I felt like there was a lot of work to be done there. So we spent a lot of time talking about my story, about the things that I had done on the media side, on the marketing side, relationship building, working with sponsors and brands and equipment lines and supplement lines, and you know, all the things that we all do on a day-to-day basis, getting to know the athletes and working on all sort of development production phases of our industry. So he offers me this job to oversee the Olympia. We get to the end of the lunch and he offers me this job, and I looked at him and I said, David, you realize that's not really what I do. Right. You know, I'm not a long-standing contest promoter. There's promoters around the NPC that have been doing this for years, and they do a great job on it, and they organize weekends. And he said, that's not what I'm interested in. He was interested in all the other things that would sort of help increase the overall value of the Olympia as an asset.
Which it needed.
Which it did need. And so that was something that, so when you ask about how all those little pieces and those parts, people always talk about what kind of advice can you give. I'm sure you get that a lot. I mean, you guys get that question all the time. You know, what's the advice that you can get to somebody? And that is, learn every corner of this thing. Because the more multi-dimensional you are, the more valuable you are. Because everything that we do integrates customer engagement, social media, digital, stage production, sponsorships, exhibitors, the business of what we do, strategic alliances. There's licensing, there's so much to what we do that if you're one-dimensional, you're quickly replaceable.
Yeah, and I think that's the diversification of a bodybuilder. Starting out in the gym, you learn the mechanics of dieting and training, and you have to stick to it. Like, you got to suffer the defeats and find your little victories here and there. But when you find that niche in your resume, with the media background, with the relationship building, with the history of the game, and putting yourself in places of opportunity, you don't know what door is going to open. And not too many years ago, you and I were calling the Mr. Olympia for the World Wide Web, which I'm very comfortable in doing. And now you are running the Olympia, and you didn't get a blue book for this. It was baptism by fire to take over and run it. But you were prepared because you've been going to the Olympia since '98.
Yeah, you know, the first thing that we did was, because we knew it was going to be a reset, and it really was. And we brought in a really good team. And you know, I get to work with you guys every day. We brought in Tamer Algindia.
And you have a good team.
And I have a good team. That's right. That's right. and brought in Tamer El-Gandhi to help us produce the weekend, and I got to bring over my longtime friend Angelica Nebbia to be our Olympia coordinator, and
Tim Gardner,
and then of course Martine and Caden on the production side, and then we recently added Tim Gardner to help us with some of our expo initiatives, and it's just really it's a great group. We have Heather came on and helped us with our media and travel components, and so we were able to just really bring together a true dream team. And then recently we added David Bay to oversee our social media initiatives, and we'll be talking more about that, I'm sure, as the months go leading up to the event. But it's an important thing because you'll notice that all these folks have one thing in common. They understand all the elements of this overall landscape. And it's no longer good enough to just be good at one thing. Look, we're not that big of a team, and we oversee a very large undertaking, right? Muscle and Fitness, the Olympia, Flex, Digital Muscle, all of our various brands require multiple things to thrive and to succeed, and nobody on this team can be one-dimensional. So we've really been very fortunate, even right down, to bringing in, Nico and his production team to make sure that we're able to deliver the highest quality production. And for those of you guys who don't know, they are on the other side of this camera, kind of helping us putting together something really special.
What's up, Nico? What's up, guys?
A next level undertaking, and that's really what it's all about. And you'll find that even going forward, as we make additions, even as we work with more celebrities, the celebrities that we get to work with. Last year, Mark Wahlberg was a big part of the Olympia experience. This year, Shaquille O'Neal. These are all people that are opening their worlds to us. And
you're also bringing in sponsors that weren't even on the landscape 2 years ago to be a part of this machine.
It's critical. I'm glad you mentioned that because we call those non-endemic brands, right? Non-endemic brands in the marketing world are, let's face it, the Olympia and Muscle and Fitness. It's always been about equipment, apparel, and sports nutrition. Those are the three categories that sort of drive this industry. But in order for us to grow, we need to go beyond that, and we call those our non-endemic brands. And we were able to secure a great partnership with a company called Trifecta, the #1 organic meal delivery service in the United States, and they are the title sponsor of the Olympia. We recently just did a great deal with an up-and-coming bottled water company called Northern Chill out of Wisconsin, and just another great company kind of doing things better, creating a product that's very fitness industry friendly in terms of the type of their manufacturing protocols and their whole alkaline water. And it's just and then you're finding that people who train at this level, they understand those differences. Water is not just water.
You and I did many webcasts for bodybuilding.com before it was fashionable. I mean, we were the ones that pioneered the webcast.
Right.
And so we've had a chance to have some really fun times backstage. And of course, we've got great stories, and everybody wants a good story. But one of the funniest ones, you've got to tell the story about our good friend, Heinz Sr.
Heinz. So that was fun. Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up. So Heinz, for those of you guys don't know, a Venezuelan bodybuilder?
This is gold. Yeah, I think he's from Venezuela.
Yeah.
Professional bodybuilder.
Bodybuilder.
And he's actually been a friend. I've known him for a long time.
Back in the day.
Back in those days, but I hadn't become friends with him at this point in time when we're telling the story, so I should probably take a step back. And Bob, of course, for you guys who know, Bob loves the cheesy humor, the low-hanging fruit, and you're not afraid to you're not afraid to just kind of go there. So Heinz Sr., whenever he would step on stage, Heinz would always, we would always try to come up with
take a little
creative license to his name, Heinz.
A little creative license. Right. That's a good way to put it.
So Bob would say things like, here comes competitor number 57, Heinz, or Heinz 57, or Heinz is a little bit far behind right now in the competition. I think he's going to have to
play catch up.
Okay, and so there was about 1,000 of these, and each joke was worse than the next. But we would
now listen. You are not an innocent person.
I was not.
You would, Dan. Listen. He's doing the commentary role. I'm doing the play-by-play or the color.
Right.
I know normally you're the color.
I'm the color guy.
Yeah, well, I got to step in for you sometimes. So he's just throwing softballs up. So he makes it sound like it's all me, right?
Yeah.
He's just throwing softballs up so I can just hit him out of the park. Now, we're so stupid, right, that we're crying, right? We actually literally got to, like we'd say something stupid like that.
We had to do like the pinch your leg under the table.
Yeah, we literally unplug, like we'd go to his routine, we would unplug the mics because we're literally, we got tears because we're so dumb.
And each joke is dumber than the next.
Yeah, each one is just gratuitous, and it's just like, oh my God, like people are like the corniest stuff. But that's not the fun part of the story.
The fun part is one day Bob and I are at another event, and a woman approaches us and it turns out this was the wife of Heinz Sr. And she says, "Can I talk to you guys?" Okay. So all of a sudden, it was like the mom across the street when you're growing up who wants to come over and talk to you, and you're thinking, "Oh no, what?"
And it's the way she approaches us. She's like, "Hey, how you guys doing? I'm Heinz Sr.'s wife."
And the minute she said, "I'm Heinz Sr.'s wife," our stomachs sunk.
Can I talk to you guys for a minute? And we're looking at each other like, "Oh, we're gonna get lambasted."
Yeah. So she pulls us aside and she looks at us, and our hearts are going. What did I say? It was one of those few moments where we were speechless. We just stood there and we're like, "All right, we're going to take it. We're about to get crushed by this woman who probably we thought was going to get us for criticizing her husband."
Over and over. There's 3, 4, 5 shows.
Right. So she looks at us and she goes, "I just want to thank you guys. I want to thank you guys for always talking about Heinz, always being playful with Heinz, and it's amazing how much feedback positively we've gotten about all of these comments."
Yeah.
So at that point I said, "Bob, I'm never going to make fun of your jokes ever again," because...
And she said, now unwittingly, she sets it up. She's like, "Listen, I just want to say that, I know you guys have been doing this a while, but Heinz has competed, so we're waiting for it, but we're going to get it."
Yeah.
And she kind of sets the table herself, and she's like, "So I just want to say thank you." We're like, "Oh, yeah, Heinz.
Of course, we love Heinz.
Yeah, he's great. Great guy."
That is a classic story.
We've sweated bullets, bro.
So many
laughed
of
about
those,
that for years.
Well, what's crazy about this situation, because we are coming through this whole COVID thing and trying to navigate it, it just seems like one blessing after another is falling into a promoter's basket. I mean, you've got the retirement party coming out in 10-time Ms. Olympia Iris Kyle, and the return of women's bodybuilding. Then here comes Phil Heath. Here comes Della Friedmansky Garcia. And then here comes Oksana. All these people are coming out of retirement, which is a promoter's dream. This is like exactly what you could have hoped for.
It was funny because last year at the 2019 Olympia, as you guys know, you stood there, you were at the podium, you were covering it, you saw it was a packed arena. We were particularly proud of that because a lot of the top bodybuilders, for a variety of reasons, were unable to compete.
Right.
Our reigning champion ran into some, pretty heavy issues, so he wasn't in the show. Big Ramy wasn't able to get to the show.
No Phil Heath.
Phil Heath was back at his house in Colorado.
Right.
Yeah, they were writing the show off in terms of the competitiveness.
Right. So we ended up showing up, and the place, of course, was packed. And I always thought that was a great moment for the sport because it showed that the sport, it showed that the Olympia is bigger than the lineup.
This was huge for you as well because you took over the reins. You didn't get a whole lot of help at first with, from the previous administration, just in terms of, passing the torch. Hey, here's all the information. You were literally kind of on your own, like, hey, you figure it out. And then you get the less than stellar lineup. So there was a lot of doomsayers out there. I mean, listen, the sport's ridiculed. The people with the worst case, the Olympia's going to suck this year. It's going to be nobody there. Tumbleweed's going to be blowing through. Yeah. So you had to not only overcome that, and I remember, because we had a big bro hug moment at the end. Because I'm looking out there. Now I'm the only one facing the other way.
Right.
So, and it's packed.
Sold out.
And I mean packed. Like it's sold out. Mm-hmm. The only seats that aren't sold are the obstructed view, behind the pillar.
Right.
And the ones that are behind the stage, you obviously can't use. It's jammed.
Yeah.
And I remember when we got off the thing, you talk about, you had to just be popping when this place filled up.
I think there's 2 times in my life that I actually got a little bit emotional inside that arena. One was the night Jay Cutler won the 06 Olympia.
Yeah,
that was powerful, right?
Big.
Because we all knew what Jay had gone through in his perennial runner-ups and the blue-collar people's champion.
And beating, 8-time
and he beat the greatest bodybuilder of all time, right? So he does that. And the second time was, I was just standing there in the arena, and there was a moment, and even thinking about it, it affects me a little bit because I know what happened last year, and I know how many things we had to go through. And to look around and see the energy in that building and just how jam-packed it was and how much everybody cared so deeply about this competition, about their favorite sport. And it was a powerful thing because there would have been a million reasons to justify why that place should have been empty. Right. And it wasn't. So now you talk about this year when you have the great Phil Heath coming back to compete. You have a very, by the way, do not underestimate what Brandon Curry, the reigning champion, is going to bring to the stage this year. He's very, very formidable.
Oh, yeah.
So you have Brandon coming back, and then you have Dexter Jackson potentially competing for the final time. So you have 3 winners of the Mr. Olympia competing for this year's title. So it's going to be very, very exciting. But you just mentioned a great thing. A lot of these folks are coming back, and they're coming back because they're excited about Jake's ownership. They're excited about this team, and to have the great Oksana Grishina, who I have always said is the greatest talent, male or female, to ever walk on any stage that you and I have ever shared.
And she's got 4 Olympia titles. Mind you, she's been in the Olympia numerous times. She had to sit behind Adela winning.
That's right.
And arguably, some people had her beating Adela.
Yeah.
So she bid her time, won the Fitness International, and comes over and wins the Olympia. But she is on another level with performance, and she's not going to have a walk in the park with Missy Truscott and the other girls.
And Adela coming back.
The fitness lineup is just as competitive as the men's bodybuilding.
How cool is this? So you got Whitney, who's a 2-time champ now, in the absence of Oksana, but she's never beaten Oksana.
Right.
The only person on that stage that's beaten Oksana
is Adela.
is Adela.
Gone for how many years?
And she's coming back. 7?
Yeah.
So it's great. I think it was actually Jay Mannion who pointed out to me the other day that I think in almost all the divisions, there's 3 champions in each division.
Yeah, because bikini is in the same boat. Figure, you got pretty much the same crew there with Sidney Gillen and some of those, and they're spectacular.
And don't sleep on the men's classic physique.
Oh, listen,
that's going to be a barnstormer.
And we've got some great new young talent. Like we were just in Tampa for the New York Pro. We saw Logan Franklin put his hat in the ring.
He's qualified.
Used to be in board shorts, traded them in for some trunks, but that kid's good.
Just like George Peterson moved up from the
Peterson into the 212 now. So.
The storyline for the Olympia couldn't be more of a promoter's dream for you. But this other side of that story, we're talking about Jake, a fan of the sport, acquiring the sport. I mean, it seems like all the pieces of the puzzle and the dreams for all of the players involved are coming with a certain amount of pedigree that will play to the fan of the sport. I mean, Jake being a fan of the sport, now being the owner of the Olympia, you coming up through the media, now being a producer of the Olympia, and you've got a dream team that you're working with. Is this what you saw way back? Could you even visualize this?
Well, look, certainly our goal every single, and by the way, we just received the athlete contract back from Heidi Chupan.
Beautiful.
Some other news to share.
Some of the athletes won't like to hear that.
Right. Good news for fans of Heidi. Good news for fans for us. But there are some athletes that are going to.
And on that note, I did see the other day that the Olympia, put out something to the athletes that you actually figured out a way to get them here.
Well, the Pro League, it's not so much a figured out a way to get them there. Obviously, one of the real concerns has been the international athletes and their ability to get to the U.S. to compete. And with COVID and with the overall state of the world, there are some challenges and there have been some concerns. But thanks to a whole lot of support from Jim Mannion and Tyler and their team, they've done a real good job of trying to be proactive on the topic. Jake as well has taken a big interest in trying to make sure that we do everything at least within our power to make sure these athletes have a pathway to come over. So there are some policy rules, some procedure rules that provide opportunities for athletes who are in countries who are unable to get to the U.S. There are some pathways for them to sort of tailor that journey in a way that they can eventually get here in time to compete. And the Pro League office, to their credit, has been very proactive in trying to get out in front of it. And every situation is unique, so there isn't one finite answer.
But this is huge, Dan,
is a big
because,
deal.
I mean, listen, it would be a travesty if, because of outside reasons, COVID of all things, this nonsense that we've all been dealing with for 7 months now, whatever it's been, that you actually can't get to the Olympics. Show you qualified for it. It's been your dream of your entire life.
Right.
You've looked at this moment. This is finally your moment. You can't get there because of travel restrictions?
I saw the girl from Brazil, Attila. She came over and she won the bikini
Attila
at the New York Pro just last night. She's Brazilian. I mean, she made it over here. So it's happening, and I think some things are changing. One thing I wanted to circle back to, I mean, you knew Ben Weider. You knew Joe Weider. You worked with Steve Bleckman. You worked with David Pecker, and now you're working with Jake. I mean, that pedigree, that journey that you've had has brought you to this moment. All these things that are happening now, what are we missing? Is there another component? Is there another level? I mean, we're on the strip now. You got the dream team that you want. What else would you add to really
It's a relentless pursuit of expanded audiences. Every single day I wake up and I try to figure out how we can connect with new audiences and grow this thing and reach different parts of the world. That's why we started Pro Bodybuilding Weekly to begin with.
Right.
It's from day one, that has been the goal. And the names you just mentioned are people that I have so much respect for. And, I'm glad you mentioned Steve Bleckman. Of course, Steve Bleckman, the longtime publisher of MD, he's been so gracious in his coverage of the Olympia. And that's the one thing that I've really tried to bring to this role, is if you guys, for some of you guys who've been following this for a really long time, you'll know that there was always a lot of rivalries on the media side. It got really
Us
intense.
against them type.
And at one point, it reached heights that were uncomfortable, to be honest with you, and counterproductive.
Yeah.
And the sport was missing out on audiences and visibility because of egos and division that was occurring on the media side. And I always thought, what a shame. So one of my objectives from day one is I really worked hard to reach out to all the media, even the media that would be considered rival media. Look, we all share a common interest in telling the stories of fitness and bodybuilding, inspiring, motivating people to be a part of this community. And Steve, Muscular Development was a longtime rival of Flex and Muscle and Fitness.
Big time.
But
a huge contributor to the sport.
But a huge contributor. So it was very important to me to reach out to as many of these media outlets as possible. Make sure that when they come to the Olympia to cover it, they're welcomed and they're provided opportunities to cover it. Look, I will say this on the media side, because I know the media was pleased when I got this position because I'm one of them.
The guys, right? You came from that cloth.
I know what it's like to show up
right.
with my backpack at an event, trying to cover an event, and having a promoter make it difficult to do so. I know what
Just
that
to get
feels
a
like.
press pass, yeah.
Right. So to me, it was very, very important. Now, obviously, we always have to stay within general protocol because there's a certain media integrity that you want to maintain,
Right.
and there's certain things that you have to do not to water down the way the way it's covered. But you still, at the end of the day, you want to make sure that as much media as possible has opportunities to be a part of what we're doing, and they feel welcomed.
I'd be remiss, A, if I didn't use that phrase.
Okay.
B, we talk about media, we talk about all these people, and Steve Bleckman's this. I've got to give a special shout out to JM Mannion. JM is the only guy I've known longer in this industry than you.
That's crazy.
We go back to the teen days. Everybody knows our story. We were 17-year-olds battling it out.
1984, senior year in high school.
Shawn won, which was
Again.
Still pissed about that, bro.
You should be.
These judges looking at it.
Yeah, I don't
seriously.
know. They missed it.
But the only person I've known longer is JM.
Yeah.
I met JM when we first started the NPC. So he's, 3 years older than us?
Yeah.
So I'm like 15. And he's 8, so we kind of, the dads were talking about the business, this and that. We're over here talking, about whatever, sports and, but JM has been integral in, you talk about the media and the NPC News Online, which has obviously been huge and the backbone of our sport. So I got to just give a special shout out to JM, the hardest working man in the media side in bodybuilding, but he's been there literally from the beginning. He's seen
you and I are trivia guys and historians. I like to wear that moniker. He's the only guy that's been to more Olympias than myself. 33 consecutive years for me this December coming. JM reminds me that he was literally born into the Olympia the way that Sergio Oliva Jr. was. And Lee Haney's son, Josh, whose birthday is today.
Josh, that's right.
Okay.
So some of these people have come up, and even Hunter Labrada, they're born into the sport.
We've actually been around long enough to actually see the sons now battling on stage and all that. And
we're talking about.
You're a grandfather.
Yeah.
Because you're old.
It comes with the age.
Yeah, well, better you than me.
Olympia time is always birthday time.
This
time it's your birthday on the Olympia weekend.
That's right,
It was always mine in September.
My birthday's just before the Olympia this year, which will probably never happen again because it's in December.
We'll let you touch the send out.
Give me some, that would be nice, You got to give me some of your best Olympian moments, bro. I mean, when I think back, there's so many, Jay.
You said Jay Cutler in 2006.
But you know what? And that's special because, and we've talked about this many times, but that still to this day was the loudest roar from the audience I heard. When I announced Jay as the new Mr. Olympia, it felt like the whole place came towards me, like 10 feet. Like you could
everyone
feel.
Loves to cheer for an underdog, really.
It was huge. I mean, like you say, a touching moment. Like you almost got a tear in your eye for Jay because he did it.
Yeah.
But oh my God, you could feel the percussion from the audience, and nobody left. It was the first time. Now Ronnie, by that point, listen, everybody loved Ronnie. We all do. Lightweight. But by the time any Olympian gets to number. Phil seen this. Lee Haney even tell us a little bit.
3 or 4.
When you get past 3 and 4, they start rooting against you.
Yeah, they do.
You start going, and Jay, listen, everybody loved Jay. He's people's champ, right? He built his success on losses to Ronnie.
6 first runner-ups.
6 first runner-ups. That's amazing. But give me some of your best Olympia moments you remember, Dan, with
it's
special moments that you've seen, whether it's somebody retiring or
it's funny. So
losing.
Obviously, the big ones. You know, for me, it's always that first one is always special. And the '98 Olympia, I'm so grateful that was my first one because there were so many storylines attached to that show. Dorian had retired, and I remember coming into that event. I was a big fan of Nasser El Sombadi and Chris Cormier.
Where'd you have Shawn on that show?
He was
in
like
the top 5?
He was like 11th on my card. Yeah, he was like 11th. But I think Kevin beat you. He was 4th, and I think Cormier was 6th at that show.
Correct. I actually wound up getting engaged that night for 3 months.
So you were.
I was busy. I had my mind under the thing.
So you were the winner.
It didn't work out.
But we ended up.
Another loss.
But that show was great because Flex Lewis was the favorite. He was supposed to win that contest.
Not Flex Lewis.
Flex Wheeler. Isn't that funny? There was a time where Flex Lewis was the other Flex.
Yeah, now he's the other. He's the Flex now.
Flex Wheeler was supposed to win that contest.
Yeah, that's right.
It really wasn't even in doubt that Flex Wheeler was supposed to win that contest.
Ronnie came out of
Ronnie Coleman had finished 9th the year before.
Yes.
To give you some context, Ronnie finished the year before where Patrick Moore finished last year.
That's right.
That's how outlandish it was to think that a guy like that was going to come. Now, granted, he did very well prior to that.
He wasn't on the radar.
No, he wasn't.
This was Flex Wheeler's show. He was literally just going to be given
he was the heir apparent.
Being the historian that I am, let me give you some context.
Skewed as
Ronnie had already beaten Flex in 1997. He beat him at the Toronto Pro Show. Very quiet, not a lot of publicity. So going into that contest, he had a little bit of confidence about him. And Flex made the mistake of introducing him to the Guru, which is the Chad factor that changed Ronnie Coleman from the 9th to the 1st. And that's where Flex Wheeler kind of ruined it for everybody.
Right.
That being said, there are a lot of storylines, and you've seen a lot of comings and goings of some of these athletes, because the longer we're around, we see some athletes that are going to leave off the landscape. Mike Matarazzo.
I'm glad you mentioned Matarazzo.
Yes.
Matarazzo was at that '98 Olympia. I'll never forget. He came out. Of course, he did the tongue out, the most muscular thing, and the guys had such a unique flavor back then. And I know it's different today. Everything's different today. So it's today they're better in many, many ways. But at that time, there was a personality component that these guys brought, and when they walked out on stage, you felt like you really knew them in ways that were, and it's funny, you would think today you'd feel like you know them because of social media, but back then they carried they were characters back then.
Yeah. Right.
It wasn't that you just knew them, they were characters. When Cormier came out there and made his pecs dance, or when Matarazzo came out and did the tongue thing, or, look, I always say the 8th wonder of the world is being at a bodybuilding competition when Ronnie Coleman turns around and spreads his lats.
Lights out.
It's one of there are certain things in this sport that certain visuals that you just never forget, and that's one of them. And
one of the components is the music that some of the guys play. You hear the song on the radio, and it takes you back.
I think
Olympia.
When I hear that DMX song, I think of Flex Wheeler.
Yeah.
Or when I hear some of these slow ballads, I think of you. Or when I hear, I'll never forget the song. I think the song I Apologize. Jay used it as his posing music the year after he got beat as almost a message to his fans.
Yeah,
and he ended up winning the title back. But you're right, the music, it really meant something. And so I really hope the guys can, and the ladies as well, can start to get that back, because it's really important.
The girls are way better posing than the guys. They're more creative. They actually put some thought process into it. What you did is a lost art.
Yeah, well, I hear it is in terms of the effort, I think. But when we're talking about that, now coming back with the women's bodybuilding, what can we expect from that?
From the Miss Olympia?
Yeah, like it was gone and nobody said anything, and now it's back all of a sudden.
Yeah, so, when Jake led the charge to bring the Miss Olympia back, this is what I think got lost in that whole story. Yeah, we're excited that these women are going to be back on the Olympia stage. That's important for the athletes because they deserve it. They're a big part of the history of bodybuilding. Joe Weider, if he were sitting here today, he would echo those sentiments.
Sure.
Right.
But there was just something about what it means to the community. I get a chance once or twice a year to go to some of the Wings of Strength female bodybuilding championships. In particular, the Rising Phoenix, which has kind of emerged as the preeminent championship in women's bodybuilding.
And the one they had last night here in the New York Pro.
Yeah, that's right. And the competitors, the fans, the folks who follow female bodybuilding, it means a lot to them.
Fanatical.
They really care in a very sincere way about female bodybuilding because it touches people in different ways. When you guys go to the gym, when we go to the gym, and you put on a bunch of muscle, everybody celebrates your muscle. They tell you how great you look.
Yeah.
They walk up to you, they want to touch your arms, and they celebrate and they praise and they admire your physiques. In the world of women's bodybuilding, while that is true to some extent, there's also a lot of detractors.
Right.
So just imagine going through all that hard work, all that suffering, all that sacrifice, and walking down the street and being frowned upon for your efforts. Going through all of that, not to be praised, but to be criticized, that's a heavy thing. And I've always felt that if people actually stopped and they understood the plight of a female bodybuilder, and they understood how hard they work and how little they often get back for their hard work. To me, if us as a bodybuilding community, if we can't embrace that, if we can't welcome that to our biggest events in the world, then we're missing the point. And so for me, having female bodybuilding back, I go to these events, and when the events are always over, they come up to all of us, and they're so grateful. They're so appreciative. They're not complaining that the prize money, the fourth place prize money wasn't big enough. They're not complaining that the publicity or the stage wasn't good enough. They're just grateful and proud to represent the sport that they love, and that makes that side of the industry, I think, unique in nature from a character standpoint. I really admire it.
In 10-time Miss Olympia, Iris Kyle said it best when they took away the Miss Olympia. She said, and she's got 10 of these Olympia titles, more than Ronnie Coleman. She said it's like taking a baby away from its mother, because without the Miss Olympia, her direction was lost. That's all she knew was the Miss Olympia, and then she wakes up one day and it's gone. She didn't want to be the Rising Phoenix champion. She didn't want to be the New York Pro champion. So she had to put a whole lot of things in perspective, because what she did every day of her life suddenly had vanished. And can you imagine? She wakes up and 5 years later, it's back. And now she's going for record number 11. I mean, she's probably the more excited out of all the comebacks. She's got a lot to answer for, number one.
And
because
listen, there's people that are excited she's going in because they want to beat her.
Yeah, they want to make a name off her.
Margie Martins. You got some
There's some pressure.
Well, listen, I mean, is there any bigger feather in your hat than beating a 10-time Miss Olympia?
Well, and let me add to that. Last year at the podium, you had the privilege of announcing for the first time that the Miss Olympia was going to return.
And it was a huge ovation.
And I got to be honest with you, I was nervous, because I didn't know. Until you put something out in the universe, you never really know how people are going to respond. And we had heard some people say that, there's not an audience for that, and then we had heard people say that, people are going to be really excited. But until you put it out, you really don't know. Especially when it's in a live audience, you can't control that.
No, and when we had talked about that, obviously I've got the written piece that I'm going to put that out. You don't know what's coming. I mean, it could have been like the golf clap thing where you're like, oh boy, that just hit a big but it actually went the other way. It was a big ovation. I know you guys put out, Wings of Strength put out a piece with me saying that, and then you see the reaction and you hear it. That's not dubbed in. That was the actual reaction from the crowd. So that had to make you, again, a little sweat off the brow.
And we'll have to post that, because Nico and his production team did a great job of capturing that moment. And the place absolutely erupted. And when that happened, you talk about another emotional moment for me. Of course, Jake and Alina and Hella and Alex, their team were
the whole crew there
right up front. And I know how hard they worked to champion that process. And and worked with AMI as well to put that all together. And I just they humbly, Jake humbly took a wave, and I think Hella took a wave also, the reigning champion. And it was just so great to see the place go nuts.
Yeah, that was cool. You've made a lot of changes already. Some of these go back to last year, but moving to the 212, giving them their own night, I think was huge. And it really, not that they need to be solidified, because the 212's got their own. They got their own following, they got their own fans, they're a very tight-knit crew. That was a good move. Talking to Jake, and yourself, of course, the emphasis now seems to have shifted, where the last 14 years it was kind of just spinning our wheels, put out a good product. Obviously the Olympia is the Olympia. But the emphasis seems to have shifted to the fans. What do the fans want? What can we do to engage the fans more? What can we do to... So it looks like a lot of what you're planning on changing and implementing and putting in seems to be more fan-oriented.
No question. And it's funny, getting back to Jake and also Tamer, one of the things that we've worked together on is it used to be where Saturday night was like the main event.
Sure, that's the main night,
And then Friday night was almost sort of this redheaded stepchild. And that was one of the first things I really wanted to get out in front of, because Friday night, if you think about what happens on Friday night, it's one of the biggest nights of the year in bodybuilding. But because it happens before the Saturday Night Olympia, people kind of discard it as, we're going to go out to dinner that night. So I ended up making a real, firm sort of decision to let's do some things to make Friday night really meaningful, make it undeniably meaningful. So we decided the first thing we did was the 212 finals, which previously had been held on Saturday night with the big Mr. Olympia division. So we would crown a 212 Olympia. Flex Lewis would, of course, win that. And then an hour later, we crowned Mr. Olympia.
Right.
And then the 212 champion, it was almost relegated to the back page again.
Yeah, right.
Nobody cared.
Old news,
because
right?
we were already focused on Phil or Shawn Roden or Dexter or whoever won. And so the first move we made was let's put the 212 so that the Friday night ends with the crown of the 212 champion, because that's a big title in our sport.
Absolutely.
And that deserves to be the way, that deserves to be a confetti moment, right?
Absolutely,
You
yeah.
know?
Listen, they should get the big canisters.
Sure.
Absolutely. You know, I happen to be standing under, by the way.
Sure.
When those things blew off, I was covered.
That was by design. We actually aimed it at you.
Yeah, I think it was in my podium.
Right.
It was just poof.
Right.
But
There's still some confetti in your
Yeah, I
shirt,
know.
actually.
I'm still
Yeah.
shagging it out. But
Yeah.
how important is it? I know one of the other things you pinpointed. How important is it to get all the divisions on the Joe Weider Olympia stage? Because half of these were relegated to the Expo.
Right.
Now again, that's a great stage. I mean, listen, it's not like some dinky little thing. And I mean, there's a lot of thought. It's a
Sure.
big grand stage. Prejudgings are held there for a lot of the divisions because you just can't do everything in one stage.
Right.
But the finals, a lot of those finals, I always thought were a little understated.
Yeah.
I mean, you're the best in the world at what you
That's
do.
right.
But you're in an expo, which is obviously a raucous. The things
Right.
are going on. You can hear booths. Loudspeakers, music in the background. How important was it to get all these athletes?
So important. You're right. We were having situations where, like, the Olympia men's physique champion was being crowned on the expo stage at 11 a.m. in the morning.
Right.
It was happening with the women's physique division and a few of the other divisions. And one of the things that was really important is we felt that if you are an Olympia champion in any division, you need to be, there needs to be the brightest possible spotlights need to be shining on you and your division
They earned it.
on the biggest stage in the world. So we worked really hard. Now, of course, the downside to that is it does create a slightly longer program.
Yep.
And we're always trying to figure out ways to tighten that up a little bit. So that's one of the hazards of that. But now adding the Miss Olympia, I think there's 9 Olympia divisions now.
Wow.
So it really is going to be challenging, but they do belong on that stage. And I'm glad you noticed that, because I think a lot of the fans, especially who are spending big money to be
Nobody's
there.
looking to get out of
Right.
there. I mean, I think one of the mistakes over the past 10 years or so has been it has been kind of chopped down. And,
Right.
okay, well, we got to get this in 2.5 hours. Look, nobody's got nowhere to go. Everybody is there to be at the Olympia. You're specifically there to be at the Olympia. You're just not kicking around
some of the
gambling.
disconnect happened because it was 2 different venues and you had to cross town. And
That didn't help.
If you're
Yeah.
someone that goes regularly, you almost had to make a decision because of traffic and logistics and parking and what hotel you're staying at,
Yep.
this, that, and the other. So bringing it all together in the location that you've chosen this year is going to be a huge step forward for the fan experience, especially it's a performing arts
Sure.
type theater
Oh, yeah.
instead of an arena. That's probably the biggest move and the boldest move. I'm curious what you would think if Joe and Ben Weider were still alive and you're in this role. Like, could you see them seeing you in this role? I mean, I know they're much, in terms of their age, is way beyond us, right? But if they're looking down on us right now, like, are you carrying that torch? Because you got your mentorship from those guys.
Yeah, so I would say that I don't think that they would have seen me in this role because I didn't see myself in this role.
Right.
There was never really a pathway to this role. I never
Right.
even contemplated
And
it.
it's funny to say that Ronnie Coleman actually said he never visioned himself as being Mr. Olympia and became 8-time Mr. Olympia.
Right.
It's kind of weird how that happens.
It just sort of happened, but I will say that I'd like to think that they would be pleased only because whether it's me, you, or anybody, I think it would matter to them that somebody who understands the history of our sport, who understands sort of the the entire energy that they built this sport on and the values that they brought to this whole community. I think it would be a shame if it was led by someone who didn't understand those things.
And you made the movie about their life bigger.
Right. So we made the movie, and and it's funny. Again, we can talk about that, but I think it's very important. Like I said, hopefully the next guy who does my job also knows the history and where we all came from and how we got to where we are. I think it's so important. So, sometimes things can become sterile if they become too corporate.
So
Right.
And,
you spearheaded the effort to put together the movie Bigger, which is, for those who haven't seen it, you got to see this. It's the story of Joe and Ben Weider, literally the origins of where they came from,
Right.
the beginnings of the coming up with the name Mr. Olympia.
Right.
You spearheaded that, and we've talked about this 1,000 times privately, but publicly, it's such a accomplishment. I've dabbled obviously in movies and commercials, small roles, but I know the industry. it's so hard to get a finished piece done,
Made, yes.
financed, produced,
right.
directed,
On the
cut,
screen.
and actually makes the screen. And again, to this day, I think that's one of your biggest accomplishments. Is you actually, again, you spearheaded. You made that happen. How cool was it when we saw the premiere?
It was amazing.
To see that effort come out on screen.
It was an amazing day. And you used the word spearhead. Eric Weeder came on and executive produced it with us,
Right.
and provided really the engine to make this
Sure,
thing happen.
yeah.
And of course, the great producer Steve Jones, was the driving force behind putting all the pieces together as the development process continued. But you're right, I did bring the parties together, and then the rest was history, and we were able to put something together.
And even cooler, you actually got us some cameos.
I
in there.
did, but you make a great point about getting a film done.
Very difficult.
I would say there's probably few businesses that are harder than filmmaking in Hollywood and getting a movie into the theater. The number of things that have to happen, from getting a good script to getting it funded to getting the director that you want, and once you get the director attached, and only then can you get somebody to play the lead.
Right.
And if you lose that, director, then you lose your cast. And then this can go on as a vicious cycle for years and years and years, and then you finally get the film shot, if you're so fortunate to be among the 10% of projects that ever get shot. And then the movie gets shot, and then you have to hope that somebody's willing to distribute it and pick it up.
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces.
There's so many pieces, and then in the end, yes, to sit in that theater, it first screened at the Cannes Film Festival, and then it ended up going through its rounds in New York and LA, and it finally had a short run, 3 or 4 weeks in the theater. Didn't do much in the theater, but you can see it today on HBO. You can see it today on HBO.
And listen, you ended up pretty good. I mean, Colin Von Moger as Arnold, I think, did a great job.
Yeah.
How cool is to have Sergio Jr. play his father?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, even cooler. But the segment we had, the bodybuilding segment, because a lot of the movies is a period piece of you're back in the 30s and the 40s and all that. So, it kind of moves up quickly into the 1970s. But what I thought was cool is when we were shooting it, you kind of put us in as consultants on it. But George, the director, what a great guy. I mean, listen, I've worked with directors. A lot of times, you don't want to step on toes. I mean, you can come up with, listen, not for nothing, but, and they'll be like, okay, guy, we got this. This guy was the coolest guy in the world.
Yes.
He actually embraced it and actually came, like you actually told him, you know what, Bob knows a lot about this stuff, ask him. And he did. And he says, he actually kind of let me direct it. Remember that like he almost let me direct the one part, which I thought was the coolest thing in the world.
The disappointing aspect of the movie was it just should have been longer because there's so
I
much
know,
more
I know
meat
it.
on the bone.
Hey, you know what that means?
Yeah, the sequel.
Part two.
No,
Part two.
but you're right.
Even bigger.
He's moved on to bigger things since that.
The director, George Gallo, did a really nice job. You are right.
He was great.
But the rest of the cast was wonderful. Julianne Hough came in and played Betty Weeder brilliantly. A great actor named Tyler Hoechlin played Joe Weeder.
Yeah.
Tom Arnold came in. Victoria Justice was in the
Yeah.
film. And it was one of the final movies.
The guy that played Bob Hoffman, what's his name?
It was one of the final films.
Not technically Bob Hoffman.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Right. Not technically.
It was Bill Hawke, I think it was.
Yeah, Bill Hawke. But it was one of the final films of the iconic Academy Award nominated actor Robert Forster.
Oh, that's right. From Rochester, New York, by
Right,
the way.
right, and he of course
hometown.
was tremendous.
It was a great movie. Where can we see that at? Is that online?
It's on, you
somewhere?
can see it on HBO.
That was another.
Was it Kevin?
Kevin Durand.
Kevin Durand.
He played the villain.
What a great character
Yes,
actor.
that's the guy I like.
And if you know bodybuilding history,
Yeah.
and even though they use a different name, we all know it's Bob Hoffman.
Yeah.
Do we though?
Kind of, yeah. Unofficially, you didn't hear it here, but he plays a great role. I mean, he's just mean. Like he captures, like he's a guy you hate.
No, listen. I mean, there's pumping iron, and then there's bigger.
Yeah.
You've got to see those if you're in the body.
Well, Pumping Iron's a documentary. Bigger is a theatrical, scripted film.
But again, it comes back down to history. So I'm saying that you're the right man for the right job at the right time because of your pedigree and your upbringing in the sport of bodybuilding. Just like we said about Jake, he was waiting for the opportunity.
Right.
And through the grace of your relationship, the opportunity came, and the right guy for the right job took over the Olympia, and here you are running it. I mean, we could talk forever. We go back so far.
I'll add that Arnold was very critical of the movie.
Yeah.
Arnold did not say because he lived it, and of course he lived it. So he was very critical, but he said some public things very critical about the film, and I actually felt on some level, because in all fairness, Arnold, the last 3 or 4 films that Arnold has made have been pretty heavily criticized, right?
Yeah, that's part
so
of the
I almost
game.
felt like maybe this was his way of kind of
giving it back,
and being on the other side of giving criticism.
Nobody who they're ever making making a movie about is ever going to like it because they know what really happened. Now listen, we all know it's movies. It's
like The Last Dance with Michael Jordan.
Well,
right.
A lot of the guys that were there, they have a different view.
I did the See Arnold Run movie years ago where I got the part of Lou Ferrigno.
Right.
Yeah.
And
we still don't understand how you got passed over for Best Supporting Actor.
What the heck?
You know what? Still a mystery to me.
Screwed again.
Maybe having no speaking lines probably didn't help. But again, there was historical inaccuracies that we know as bodybuilders, but they don't really care about as producers of the movie.
Right.
That's why I like George so much. Because he was willing to listen and go, well, you tell me, listen, I wasn't there. You tell me what they would have done.
Right.
And that's set. So we're in Alabama, and they got this theater that's been around since 1902. And they got, it looks like 1970 Mr. Olympia. I mean, the lights, like the Mr. Olympia, remember I had the single lights that spelled out
it was
Mr.
very good.
It is dead on the money.
Yeah.
Dead on the money. But George was so good that he's just like, yeah, you tell me. I'm like, oh, okay, well, here's how they would have done this. Here's what they did this.
Let me tell you something. It was the largest budgeted fitness-themed production of all time.
And you, my friend, now listen, producing the thing, spearheading the thing, you actually got to produce credit on the thing, that's all cool. But you played Bud Parker.
Bud Parker. So, Bud Parker, for those of you guys who don't know who Bud Parker is, we didn't know I was playing Bud Parker until later in the shoot. So, when I first read the script, I saw that they were going to actually do a scene of the 1970 Mr. Olympia, when of course that's the first time Arnold won the Olympia.
Right, over Sergio.
Over Sergio. So there was like 3 lines in the script that said we need, that said MC.
It just said Olympia MC.
It said Olympia MC. So I called up our casting director who did a great job casting the film. And I said, listen, if you don't find somebody to play this, I can do this. This is within the scope of something I can do. I am not an actor, but I can do this. And so we ended up, so they ended up calling me and said, you could do it. So I was in the film. And then just before we are actually on set in our trailers, getting ready to shoot the film, we called up the great Peter McGuff. You used the word historian to describe me. I don't even put myself in that category. I'm not a historian. I'm a guy who loves bodybuilding, knows the history, but historians are next level guys. Peter McGuff.
Bob, me.
Right,
Peter,
like you guys.
He's
Peter,
even over us.
Yeah, he is.
He's Yoda.
He's Yoda.
He's senior without
Yoda
the Heinz.
That's right. And I remember, and I called up Peter, and only Peter would know this.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, Peter, who was the MC of the 1970 Mr. Olympia? And he actually remembered that it was a guy named Bud Parker. And so in the credits on the film, it says Dan Solomon as himself. But in reality, it should say Dan Solomon as Bud Parker.
Yeah.
Once again, we got to get the band back together. Peter McGough.
You can only be so accurate.
You can't talk bodybuilding without talking about Peter
But I thought it
McGough.
was still cool because I actually have the original program from the 1965 Olympia.
Do you really?
Oh, yeah, I do.
Ooh.
Signed by Larry Scott.
Oh, that's a nice
when we had the
piece.
50th anniversary and we had all the Olympians there, because we still had everybody.
Yeah.
What a great moment, by the way. You talk about great Olympian moments.
Well, let me tell you about a moment. I was 1 month old, and you were 3 months from being born.
That's
so
right.
that was a moment.
Yeah.
You need to remember that.
Right.
I remember nothing of what you're saying.
They didn't even have cameras back then.
But talk about, I actually got to, because I brought it with me.
Yeah.
I found it on eBay some years ago.
That's a good find.
It's a huge find because
That's a fan right there.
unless you really know it's your stuff, and I got 2. I got the 65 and the 66. Really cool. But I get to Larry Scott backstage, and I'm like, Mr. Scott, Scotty,
hey, beat me up.
He's like, huh? And but I actually had the program and had him sign it, which I thought was cooler than cool. But you look in the program and you talk about a time capsule.
Yeah.
It's got like orchestra. Like the play, they had an orchestra there playing at the Mr. Olympia,
like Titanic,
Miss Americana,
Right.
Then they had like the Mr. It was all in one night, Mr. America, the Mr. Universe, and it's got like names, like Earl Maynard is in there, Harold Poole,
Some old school cats.
Oh my God, it's so cool! But it's this whole description of like the night's events, and it's a big red carpet event.
It's funny that you mentioned the souvenir program because just to tell you what a pure fan I was, I go to the 1998 Olympia, I bought the program. And remember when I told you I went to that banquet afterwards, the one where I met Darren?
Yeah.
I actually had the black Sharpie. This is back when people got autographs. It wasn't about selfies. It was autographs. And I was a collector. I'm a big collector of memorabilia. So I actually walked around the room, and I had every person sign the program. And I still have it from you to Dorian was in that room.
Did he charge you?
Ron, he charged me $10 for the signature. Yeah. But everybody signed the thing. I think even Joe signed the program.
Wow.
And it's all on there. And I just... Every time I look at that, I'm reminded of that's how I felt when it started. And I don't ever want to lose that. Yeah. I don't ever want it to stop being special. And I don't ever want to lose sight of the fact that, you know, these athletes are superheroes on many levels to fans around the world, and they inspire and they motivate. And I really, really work hard to look at that program as often as possible and see those autographs and think of the kid. I mean, I wasn't that young then. I was probably in my late 20s, but that we're running around getting the autographs with my Sharpie. And I remember Aaron Baker. They all signed it. Everybody signed it.
You know what's cool is we've been doing the Olympia for years. You know, together in various things, coverage, emceeing, whatever. Press conferences, you know, we've all done those, whether together or apart.
Right. Never together, though.
Yeah,
never. They never put us all together. But it seemed like last year, I know you had a tremendous amount of work. It was stupid, the amount of work you had in a short time frame to do it. But you still had fun. We had fun. Like we still did exactly what we've been doing for years with all the O's, Shawn O, God bless him, Grego, Rob Wilkins. Like we got our little Shawn O. We'd always go get coffee down in the front. Yeah. Even despite your workload, you still found time.
Had to.
Because you know what? Listen, I know we're gone out of the Orleans and we were there for many years, but that kind of became.
Right.
Listen, it wasn't the best place in the strip. It was off a strip, older hotel. We all know. Listen, it wasn't the greatest place, and it wasn't the worst place. We had a lot of good Olympias there, but when you walk through those doors, it was Olympia time.
It was.
You could smell it, and you know.
Like the fresh cut grass.
Yeah, like the fresh cut grass that I'm going to be doing tomorrow, unfortunately. For 3.5 acres.
Back to work, Bob.
I got to get rid of this house.
You got to sell that place.
But you know what? It was Olympia time. And it just, it smacked of Olympia. You know, we go to Big Al's there and get the chowder and the whole thing.
Even
you still found time for all this stuff.
I do.
I appreciated that.
Yeah, and even on the day-to-day, look, the days have gotten crazy, slammed busy.
Sure.
From the business of what we do and closing sponsor deals and production, all the stuff that involves muscle and fitness in the Olympia. But some of my most cherished times throughout the week is when I just pick up the phone and I talk to you guys and we just talk about, you know, bodybuilding, or we just talk about stuff. And that to me is like, and that's so important, because if you don't do that, you get lost in the business of this stuff. And then it starts to become something that is no longer fun and it's work. And I don't ever want that to happen.
I don't think any of us started this business to work, and so the passion is clearly evident, and the progress that you've made from where you've come is clearly evident by your passion. And of course we could be here talking for another 5 or 6 hours, but of course, Bob, people got planes to catch and we got other things to do. It was great catching up with Dan. I mean, this is the beginning. I mean, we're in year number 2 for the Olympia production, so I'm sure this thing is going to be taking on a life of its own as we get 5 years from now. The fans are going to be the benefactors. Real quick, the pay-per-view component, is that a done deal, or is that a process?
So we are in the process of exploring all scenarios to make sure that everybody in the world can watch this year's Olympia.
Important.
That is always the priority. I can tell you that one of the most significant elements of Jake's acquisition is Jake is heavily focused on making sure that there's something set up so that not only can the world watch Olympia weekend, but they can watch it at a very high level.
Yeah. All right, that's going to wrap things up. Dan, thanks for coming by. These have been great stories.
Great being here.
And I'm sure people have enjoyed seeing where you came from and where you're going. So thanks for coming by.
Appreciate it.
For my co-host Shawn Ray, I'm Bob Chick. Another great edition of Monday Night Muscle.